no body, no crime. That phrase is often used in true crime reporting, as it's usually the narrative prosecutors and law enforcement make for not pursuing justice in any given case. The saying is simple and catchy, having become known in pop culture over the past decades, and even leading to multiple artists using it in their songs. However, when it's said to you, it's devastating. The expression boils down to one thing and one thing only. That being, it doesn't matter how much direct or indirect evidence there is that a crime occurred, or that a significant amount of blood evidence was found in a victim's home, or that a person hasn't touched any of their bank accounts since they were last seen. All that matters is that without a body, it stands to reason that a person could have willingly made a choice to leave on their own accord, and there is a chance, however small, that they disappeared on purpose. As long as there's not direct, unflinching proof that that person is dead, there is a chance that they are alive, and it would be unjust to send someone to prison over a murder that might not have happened. Moreover, cases are harder to prosecute when there is a chance that the person is alive. What usually occurs in these instances is the police will find a girth of evidence pointing to the victim's death. They will create a near-perfect case, finding witnesses who agree that the last time they saw the missing party, they were happy and planning for the future. They will find text messages from the missing person, alluding to their fear of the suspect, and even saying if they go missing, it was because of this other person. The case will be nearly rock solid, with the only caveat being that their remains haven't been found, and because of this, the prosecution will say that they don't think it is right to go forward. They will usually tell the victim's family they agree that the evidence is damning and that the suspect is the person responsible, but they will emphasize the fact that they have one shot at a court case due to double jeopardy laws, and that if the person is found not guilty, they won't be able to try him again. The devastation that follows the phrase "no body, no crime" is palpable, with the victim's friends and family feeling let down by the justice system. Luckily, that isn't the case for the story we're covering today. Welcome back to another episode of Dreading, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today we are going to be covering the case of Anna Walshe, and how her husband wound up being behind bars, despite the police still not knowing what happened to her. This case is still developing, and we're already planning on making follow-up content for this video. However, we have received so many emails, comments, and private messages asking us to break down the facts of this case, so we made this video a priority. Before we start, I would like to take a moment to thank my patrons over on Patreon for making this content possible. The last few weeks, YouTube has come down hard on my channel, and without their support, neither I or my brother would be able to afford to do this. Your support means the world to both of us, and we are extremely grateful. But with all of that said, let us begin. Anna Walshe was born Anna Ubicic in Belgrade, Serbia, on April 13th, 1983. Anna was described by her mother, Milanka, and her sister, Alexandra, as being extremely hardworking. She was the type of person who had an almost unflinching focus on her desires, and was constantly chasing after some life goal. They were quoted as stating that if Anna wanted something, no matter how impossible it seemed to anyone else, she would find a way to make it hers. Anna herself seemed to make an allusion to this on her own social media, posting a photo of herself in 2021 with the caption, "If it's to be, it's up to me." In 2005, after completing school in Serbia, she immigrated to the United States, with the hopes that she would find more opportunities for herself. When she arrived in the US, she took the first job that would have her, not wanting to waste any time without an income. She was hired as a housekeeping attendant at the inn at Little Washington in Virginia, but by 2006, she had worked her way from a housekeeper to a server in the restaurant. Those who worked around her talked about how motivated and unrelenting she was. She would take back-to-back shifts, picking up as many hours as were available, and she never seemed to complain. In 2007, she moved to New York City, but by 2008, she decided to move to Massachusetts, where she worked full-time at the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox. The Wheatley is a luxury hotel, boasting beautiful rooms for nearly $2,000 a night. The hotel was built in 1893 as a luxurious 19-bedroom home, and during the fall months, the entire hotel gets booked out by men and women wanting to experience the beautiful autumnal atmosphere. The hotel caters to incredibly wealthy clientele, and because of that, Anna was immediately surrounded by affluent men and women. It would be here where she would meet her future husband, Brian Walshe. According to the couple, Brian had been staying at the hotel when he first laid eyes on Anna, and was immediately taken by her beauty. Anna would say the same of him, immediately being drawn to him the moment she laid eyes on him. However, they wouldn't begin dating until 5 years later, as Anna had married a man she had worked with at the inn at Little Washington, but the two kept in touch, feeling drawn to each other. According to Boston 25 News, Anna left the Wheatley Hotel and began working as an assistant front desk manager at the Willard Intercontinental Hotel in Washington, D.C., working her way up to front desk manager in 2012 and front office operations manager in 2013. She continued to climb the corporate ladder, becoming the front office director for the Intercontinental in Boston in 2015. Brian and Anna would begin dating in 2013 and would eventually wed in 2016. And from all the pictures they posted together and loving missives they wrote publicly to each other, their relationship seemed nearly perfect. But things weren't quite the same behind closed doors. After a year of dating, Anna would be compelled to call the police on her boyfriend, citing that he had made threats against her life, as well as her friend's life. She didn't name Walshe in the complaint, but gave enough identifying information that we can properly surmise it was him that she was talking about, and claimed he had made graphic, violent threats against her over the phone. But before the police could act, she stopped cooperating. Friends of Brian's showed proof to Boston Magazine in the form of text messages that Anna had sent at that time, where she stated that on a number of occasions Brian had gotten violent with her. But as is often the case with relationships involving domestic violence, Anna found it hard to leave Brian and protect herself. The image that they showcased publicly was one filled with wedded bliss. The pair traveled around the world, taking aesthetically beautiful photos and showing their friends and family just how amazing they were. Between their lavish travels across the globe, the newlyweds moved into Brian's mother's lavish home, and a year after the wedding, they would officially start their family, with Anna becoming pregnant with her first child. However, despite living in a spacious home, Anna and her mother-in-law were not seeing eye to eye. They were both described as incredibly hard-headed, opinionated women, and whenever they disagreed, it would lead to chaos. After only a few months at the residence, Anna told her husband that they should begin looking for their own home, one where they could feel like real adults. Friends around the couple claimed that this caused a fair bit of annoyance in the relationship. Brian, it seemed, didn't understand why Anna didn't want to live with his mother for the rest of her life, and Anna didn't understand why her wealthy husband didn't want to get his own home. She continued to work hard, alongside being a mother, wanting to give her children every opportunity she could. Eventually, in 2020, she began working as an operations director for the Mutlu Group in Boston, before moving over to Tishman Speyer, a real estate investment company. Her new job was based out of Washington, D.C., but instead of uprooting the lives of their 3 sons, Anna and Brian decided it would be best if she split her time between the 2 states. According to Alyssa Kirby, a close friend of Anna's, Anna wanted the family to move and be all together. She would often talk about how miserable she was without her children, and how seeing them grow up through a phone screen was heartbreaking for her. Anna believed that her splitting time was a short-term fix, and that with time, Brian and her sons would join her in D.C. Their relationship, which seemed idyllic to those around them, quickly began to show cracks, with Anna openly talking to her friends about the fights they would get into. She told her friends that she wanted her family to be together, and that Brian wasn't being amenable, and she felt as if he was purposely sabotaging the plans that they had made. She stated he kept filling her head with false promises and false dates when they could finally reunite for good. As he continued to push the dates further and further away, she began to get worn down. But even in those conversations, she kept the truth about who Brian really was a secret. Brian Walshe was characterized by those who knew him as the kind of person who people were drawn to. He seemed to have no social inhibitions and could walk into any room and immediately make friends. He was the type of man who seemed to know everything and everyone, always having some new anecdote to tack on to someone else's story. But while some people would find his behavior obnoxious, when he did it, it seemed classy and interesting. If you were going on a trip to Greece, Italy, or France, he knew exactly where you should stay, what airline you should take, what museum had the best art in the area, and who you should talk to if you wanted to eat the best food. He seemed worldly, and like the type of person who could quickly get out of any jam, because people just liked him. He had also garnered quite the reputation for himself as being incredibly extravagant when it came to his own money, especially when it came to food. He routinely would go to high-end restaurants and order the chef's tasting menu, which ran the cost of his meals up to the thousands. He would order wines worth $25,000, and on one occasion was cited as ordering a restaurant's entire inventory of truffles to eat on his own. People who knew Brian liked him, but he let very little of himself actually be known. He was always shy about how he got the money he spent, and would routinely tell people different things. To some, he claimed that he dealt in art, selling some of the world's most famous paintings and earning millions in the process. To others, he claimed he came into his wealth when he and his college roommate created Expedia, the airline ticketing service, and then sold it for hundreds of millions. And to others still, he said he made his wealth through owning oil fields overseas. Though his stories changed and at times seemed completely outlandish, he seemed to have the knowledge and wealth to back them up. On one occasion, after his credit card was declined over a $6,000 restaurant bill, he left his Breguet watch as collateral, telling the restaurant manager he would be in the next day to settle the bill and make things right. He was so convincing to the manager and to those around him that they agreed to the arrangement, believing the issue to be a small, insignificant hiccup. The next day, Brian would come into the restaurant and settle the bill for $8,000, throwing in an extra $2,000 to smooth things over, and to show that he was not the kind of man who would run out on his commitments. His wealth was similarly evidenced by the residence he purported to own. He told his friends that he lived at 225 Beacon Street, a $10.5 million, 5-story, 6,000 square foot brownstone. Though he never let any of his friends into his home, he would meet his friends directly outside, quelling any doubts that the home belonged to him. Brian was viewed by those who spent time around him as an enigmatic, interesting man. He was mysterious and cool. People were constantly trying to get close to him and try and figure him out. But that was impossible, as the Brian that everyone knew was a lie created by a con man. The luxury home he purported to own was actually owned by his mother, who allowed him to stay there rent-free. His innumerable wealth was a facade, as he would simply borrow money from anyone around him, with no plans to pay them back. To gain time, he would claim his money managers and his accountants were causing him issues, and given his aptitude for lying, his friends and lenders would usually believe him. Brian's childhood friends would state that his deep need for attention stemmed from his youth, where his parents were physically and emotionally abusive. Brian reportedly got the worst abuse from his father, Thomas Walshe, a renowned neurosurgeon. Thomas would routinely call his son a loser, an idiot, and beat the young boy while telling him he would never make anything of himself. At one point, Brian was sent to Berkshire's psychiatric hospital during his childhood, where he was reportedly diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. The psychologist there found Brian to be extremely manipulative and deceitful, often telling them lies to ingratiate himself to them. He wanted to fit in, but more than that, he wanted to be liked, and he would say whatever he could to be. A former friend would tell Boston Magazine, quote, "Being accepted by others was survival for Brian. It was all pay to play for him." However, there are some people who were around Brian when he was growing up who hotly contest his claims about abuse. Their identities were concealed in the court records I was able to find, but they claimed that even Brian's allegations of physical and emotional abuse were lies. They stated in a sworn affidavit that, quote, "Brian is not a trustworthy person, and his statements are based on lies and misrepresentations." Another anonymous former friend supplemented that assertion, stating, "Brian is an evil person and capable of just about anything. I want nothing to do with him." Despite the lying and borrowing that Brian did, he did have a way to make money himself through selling artistic forgeries. In 2016, Brian placed an ad on eBay stating that he was selling 2 Andy Warhol paintings from a private collection. The ad went further to detail that the seller needed to sell the paintings promptly, as they were undergoing home renovations and could no longer ensure the paintings' safekeeping. This ad greatly undervalued the price of the paintings, saying they were willing to part with them for under $100,000 when their value was closer to $200,000. There were some red flags within the post itself, and the idea of such an expensive, timeless piece of art being sold on eBay alongside the price of the paintings. But the seller posted the letter of authenticity from the Warhol Foundation in the post, lending to its authenticity. Immediately, this sparked interest with a number of parties, particularly Ron Rivlin of LA's Revolver Gallery. As they hold the largest gallery-owned collection of Warhol pieces, they immediately contacted the seller, asking for more information. He asked Brian to send a photo of his ad, and looked up the address itself, feeling reassured after finding that Brian lived in the $1 million home. Ron sent his assistant to go to Boston to review the paintings, and, should they be found to be genuine, purchase them outright. And unfortunately, that is what she did. Brian and Ron's assistant set out to meet at the Four Seasons, and Brian pulled out all the stops. He arrived early, carrying a luxury designer bag, making himself appear incredibly wealthy. He spoke to everyone and carried himself with a sense of confidence that set the assistant at ease. She regarded him extremely well, and after being shown the paintings, she found she was unable to verify their authenticity, as the frames the paintings were in were screwed in incredibly tightly. But, believing the man in front of her was extremely wealthy and well established in the art world, she purchased the paintings to bring them back to LA with her. When Ron received the paintings the next day, he was horrified at what he found. Immediately upon viewing them, he found that the color of the paintings was off, and when he unscrewed the frames to view the authentication on the back, he found there was none. He had just spent $80,000 on a fake painting. He immediately tried to contact Brian, calling him multiple times, sending him text after text. Brian, it seemed, was no longer interested in speaking. It wouldn't be until a week after the sale that Brian would contact the gallery owner, promising to pay back the money in full. But like he had with various friends and various restaurant owners, he made excuses as to why he couldn't pay back the money there and then. First, he said he was having issues with the bank, and they had frozen his assets due to home renovations. He got into various details, providing photos to prove his story, and said that the very moment his accounts were reinstated, he would send the $80,000 back. That was followed by more excuses, until finally, Brian sent $30,000 to Ron, claiming he would send the rest later, and that was the most the bank would allow. By this time, Ron had reached his breaking point, and he contacted the FBI. For the next year and a half, Brian was unknowingly the subject of a thorough FBI investigation. The investigation uncovered that since 2011, Brian had been running an incredibly complex scam. He had duped one of his friend's family into giving him 3 authentic Andy Warhols, as well as 2 Keith Harings and a Chinese statuette, alongside all the paperwork verifying their authenticity. He told the family that he would sell the works for them, and he would give them the lion's share of the profits in said sale. He then hired an artist to recreate the Warhols. From then on, Brian would con multiple art enthusiasts with a fairly simple scheme. He would show the original authentic pieces to the potential buyer, gaining their trust with his proof of authenticity and overall demeanor, and then at the time of purchase, he would give them the forgeries. He had successfully done this scam countless times on 2 different continents before being investigated, and there was no sign that he would stop anytime soon. In May 2018, just 2 years after getting married and 1 year after starting their family, Anna and Brian's home would be raided by police, and he would be indicted on charges of wire fraud. The charges were serious, and if found guilty, Brian would have to pay nearly $250,000 in restitution to the people he had defrauded, and worse still, he would be facing jail time. According to the people around Brian at this time, he was incredibly stressed. Everything he had done, everything he had worked towards, had gone away in an instant, and the consequences of his actions were quickly catching up with him. Shortly thereafter, Brian's estranged, abusive father would pass away, and he would quickly become enamored with his potential inheritance. He knew his father was wealthy, and should he be given his estate and access to his money, Brian felt that he would be well on his way to freedom. He could pay a world-class lawyer, he could get himself out of the financial hole he found himself stuck in, and he would be able to move forward in life like nothing had happened. But there was one issue with that. Brian's father didn't leave him anything in the will. The document read simply, "I hereby bequeath to Brian R. Walshe my best wishes, but nothing else from my estate." This will itself was found in Thomas's home after his death, in the middle of his work desk, amongst other legal documents. It seemed that Thomas hadn't formally filed the will, but his wants were clear regardless. This deeply upset Brian. Though he and his father hadn't had a relationship with each other after Brian turned 18, Brian felt he was owed an inheritance. He quickly destroyed the document, believing he had seen it before anyone else had, and there would be no documentation of what was said to him in it. Then he went to court, claiming to be the sole beneficiary of his father's estate. In December of 2018, the court initially ruled in Brian's favor, and the con artist was given access to his father's bank account with over $75,000 in it, and everything that his father had formerly owned. Shortly after, Brian immediately posted that he would be having an estate sale at the residence, posting over 100 pictures of his father's prized possessions alongside his car. The sale went off without a hitch, netting Brian thousands of dollars in the process. However, Brian's scam would quickly come to an end when a close friend of the father showed proof that a will had existed for Thomas, that it stated his son was to get nothing of his, and that Brian had seen it before going to court. The courts immediately reversed their decision, citing that the image of the will was valid, and multiple friends of Thomas spoke about how Brian had maliciously destroyed everything their friend had owned, selling or breaking the items that were left to others as a final fuck you to his memory. In 2019, Brian pleaded guilty to the charges, and it seemed that the courts were leaning less towards giving him jail time. However, in August of 2021, they were made aware of the fact that he contested his father's will and liquidated all of his father's assets falsely. This new scheme would warrant a whole new set of charges for Brian, and the prosecution asked for postponement of the sentencing in order to investigate fully. Despite Brian's scams and repeat criminal behavior, he still had someone in his corner, his dear wife Anna. It's unclear how much she knew about his antics, or if she knew anything at all, because she never alluded to them or told her friends and family about them. But she knew about the raid at their home, and she had been present. But, given Brian's propensity to lie, it's unclear if she believed he had done something wrong, or if he told her that he was being set up. What is known is that Anna believed that Brian's legal issues could be swiftly resolved by him, even though he was facing time in federal prison. According to the court documents in Brian's fraud case, Anna and her entire family wrote character letters on behalf of Brian. Before I read them, I should note, not a single one of these letters was notarized, and many people have speculated they were of course written by Brian. I cannot attest to that, but as we read, if you notice any similarities between them, that could be the reason. The first letter was from Anna. Dear Judge Woodlock, I am writing this letter to you to express my gratitude for having allowed Brian to spend the last 8 months at home supporting his children and closest family members. During these 8 months, our family was able to be together during many milestones. Our youngest son turned 1. Our middle son started to speak. And our eldest son, who had just started kindergarten when we saw you last, is now only a few weeks away from completing the year and preparing for first grade. He also lost his first tooth. We also experienced some challenges. On December 21st, 2021, my mother suffered a major neurological event, which caused heavy hemorrhage. Brian was the one who heard my mother's sighs for help within seconds and immediately called me an emergency. He was quickly able to establish that she was in severe pain and that she needed immediate medical help. My mother was taken to South Shore Hospital from our home, then transferred to Brigham and Women's, where she received treatment and stayed almost a month, until she was stable enough to leave. Now, months later, she has made about 95% recovery, and she keeps repeating that she wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her son-in-law, Brian. Not only did he save her life, but he also brought her and the entire family comfort and joy during the course of her illness. He furthermore remained positive and optimistic about her path to recovery, even when my sister and I were scared for my mother's life. He always believed she would achieve full recovery and would not give up on her even in the darkest moments. During my mother's illness and beyond, Brian continued to be in contribution and focus on charity work, serve as a coach within his Transformational Leadership Academy, continue to take care of his ailing elderly mother, and be there for his sons day in and day out. Brian has included our family, and especially our sons, in many charitable activities he's been partaking, whether it was for world peace on Dorchester or stopping by the Pine Street Inn in Boston to drop off food and sanitary supplies. Brian has been teaching our boys from an early age how important it is to share the joy and be in contribution with time and resources. Brian has been working consistently on breaking the past habits of his family, and we are all looking forward to the new chapter of his life. Thank you again for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Anna Walshe. Her mother, Milanka, wrote the following letter. Dear Judge Woodlock, my name is Milanka Ubicic. I am Anna's mother and Brian's mother-in-law. I live in Belgrade, Serbia. I am writing to thank you for giving my son-in-law mercy since last October. On December 21st, 2021, Brian found me experiencing what he thought was a stroke. He immediately got my daughter and called emergency services. I can safely say without his presence, I would not have survived. He further continues to take care of me during my recovery at the house. He was making my diabetic meals daily, and he was taking me to doctor's appointments, etc. Now, almost 6 months later, I'm making a full recovery in my country house in Serbia, and I look forward to seeing Brian, Anna, and my grandchildren upon my return in November. Brian is a kind and loving man who always puts me at ease. He is there for me even when he is having a tough day. He always says I will get to see all of my grandchildren graduate from universities. Anytime I thank Brian for saving my life, He is quick to give credit to all of those who were a part of my recovery. The doctors, my daughters, and you, Judge Woodlock. He made it clear that he was able to help me because of your mercy, and that he was able to take me to doctor's appointments because you allowed it. The first responders who came to my house all knew Brian. They knew him from his visits to the Cohasset fire station during the annual 9/11 service campaign. This made me very proud of my son-in-law. I wish to thank you for my life and for the chance you gave my grandchildren to know me, as they had already lost both of their grandfathers. Thank you also for giving Brian a chance to live a life worth living. Sincerely, Milanka Ubicic. And finally, Anna's sister, Alexandra, wrote her own letter. Dear Judge Woodlock, my name is Alexandra Dmitrichevich. Brian Walshe is my brother-in-law. I have known Brian for almost a decade. This letter is to confirm that Brian Walshe continues to consistently support his community and family. I would like to provide one of many examples. In December 2021, my mother had a medical emergency. His presence at the household was extremely supportive in the life-saving measures he took in the evening of December 21st, 2021. He was there to provide support during her lengthy recovery, along with her other family members. He was compassionate, patient, and was there to provide support to everyone in the family during those trying times. I also spent several weeks in their home in Cohasset. I got to witness him caring for our mother, his mother, their 3 sons, and actively supporting my sister with her work duties. He continues to be an upstanding member of the community by supporting many humanitarian organizations. Brian is very engaged with his family. I was always fond of Brian. He has grown up so much as a person. He credits this change to his leadership school and says that without his arrest and my sister's support, he wouldn't have had the courage or strength to make a change in his life, because change can be painful. He says that he is focused on creating positive results for everyone around him every day, and I feel that to be true, and I see it to be true in his actions. Please allow Brian Walshe and his 3 young dependents to be reunited with his spouse and their mother. Thank you for your consideration. I am available to confirm the facts in this letter as necessary. Sincerely, Alexandra. The family seemed to have the exact same takeaway, that being that the time Brian had spent on house arrest, awaiting trial, and after he had pled guilty had been a blessing, and that he was forever a changed man. This, of course, forgetting the fact that Brian had run a scheme concurrent to the trial that had filled his pockets with even more money while duping the legal system. Brian also wrote a letter to the judge, pleading for leniency. I was not able to gain access to the full letter, but according to Boston 25 News, he wrote, quote, I am not a threat to any members of our society. My only declaration and intention is to be of service to our community and beyond. I am embarrassed that it took me this long to transform, but I am committed to continuing my purpose of being in contribution, leading by example, and serving everyone I come into contact with. I am extremely sorry for my past conduct. My sorrow is multifaceted. My conduct has led to others being hurt, as well as the misuse of our government's resources that could have been focused to feed the hunger or shelter the homeless. My conduct has caused and created a world that lacks deep trust and psychological safety. Like the letters supposedly written by his wife's family, he similarly stressed the effectiveness of the court-mandated program he was a part of, stating that it forever changed him and how he wants to move about the world. He said, quote, I have created a contract for myself. I am an honest, courageous, loving leader. I repeat this contract to myself on a daily basis. I train every day on 100% integrity, 100% of the time. When a doctor asked me how I'd be able to tell the judge that I, as a medical professional, am sure that you will never break the law again, my answer was the following. Since January of 2020, I train daily on several distinctions of leadership. One of them is integrity. The letter hit all the same points as the others, as far as I could ascertain, although it seemingly makes no mention of the fact that he saved his mother-in-law's life. By December of 2022, Brian and Anna were supposed to be reunited. He was supposed to have been sentenced to a few years of probation, stemming from his amicable behavior, and the kids were going to move to Washington, D.C. to be with Anna. But because of his own actions, that no longer looked like it was going to happen. The relationship was hanging on by a thread, and soon it would snap. According to friends who saw the couple in December, they seemed like their usual selves. They invited people over for the holidays, drank champagne, and laughed about the year that had gone by. Most of the people they interacted with had no idea of Brian's legal woes, as he kept that part of his life incredibly private, and they noticed no signs of stress in the relationship. However, Anna's messages with her mother painted a much different story. These messages were originally published in Serbian by a tabloid, and allegedly were shared by Milanka herself. However, because of the origin of the source, I want to be clear that I cannot confirm all of the message's veracity. Take this portion with a grain of salt. On December 25th at 5 p.m., Anna texted her mom, "Hey mom, can you come to Washington tomorrow?" Milanka responded, "Why do you want me now? You should have told me a few days earlier." Anna, "Brian and I are arguing." Milanka, "About what?" Anna, "The kids." Milanka, "I can come in maybe 7 days. I have to take my medication, especially insulin. I don't know how long I can stay in the U.S. In March, I have an appointment with my cardiovascular surgeon." Anna, "Tomorrow, please, for 2 months." Milanka, "When is the flight tomorrow?" Anna, "At 7 a.m. or 1:30 p.m. Milanka, "I wonder if I could get on the 1:30 p.m. one. Can I go the day after 1:30 p.m.? I can visit you in 7 days. For me, this is too short a period of time." Anna, "Okay." Milanka, "What do you mean, okay?" Anna, "Okay, next week." Milanka, "I am visiting you next week. Is that what you meant? What date is that, approximately? So I can organize myself. Next week is starting tomorrow. Is that the week you meant, or the one after that? The one after January 1st? It fits me the best to visit you on the one after January 7th so I can prepare everything I need. It's not a huge deal for me to pack my stuff. However, I need to take my medication and visit the doctors. All that kind of stuff. I'm sick. I think you can understand that. Not that you think I don't want to come right now. God forbid. This is a difficult situation to me." The mother and daughter then talked on the phone for 13 minutes. They continued to text throughout the night and then early into the next day. Anna told her mother that everything was fine, and she no longer needed to come visit, then stated that Brian and her made a plan for February, but it's unclear in the text messages if she is stating a plan for her mother to come out or a plan for her and Brian. Regardless, Anna was worried enough about her safety and the state of her marriage with Brian that she asked her mother to fly back. And unfortunately, after this conversation, Anna and her mother would never speak to each other again. The day after Anna exchanged her final messages with her mom, she made plans to visit her friend, Carrie Westbrook. Westbrook had moved into a new condo, and the longtime friends wanted to hang out and catch up. But their plans would never come to be, as Anna's phone died on the way and she was unable to find the condo without help from her GPS. After charging her phone at home, Anna and Carrie made plans to see each other on January 5th, 2023, hoping to ring in the new year on a good note. Meanwhile, at home with the kids, Brian used his phone to search for the phrase, "What's the best date to divorce for a man?" On December 31st, Anna made a couple of calls to the important women in her life, but unfortunately, no one picked up. At 4 a.m. that morning, she would be seen by an unidentified family member, believed to be one of her young sons, but following that sighting, was never seen again. What happened to Anna is unknown, and likely will never be known for sure. However, what is known is that at 4:55 a.m., Brian used his son's iPad to make a series of damning internet searches. He searched, how long before a body starts to smell, how to stop a body from decomposing, how to embalm a body, 10 ways to dispose of a body if you really need to, how long for someone to be missing to inherit, can you throw away body parts, what does formaldehyde do, how long does DNA last, can identification be made on partial remains, dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body, how to clean blood from a wooden floor, luminol to detect blood, what happens when you put body parts in ammonia, and finally, is it better to throw crime scene clothes away or wash them? The following day, Anna's cell phone would be turned off for the final time. Brian then continued to make incriminating searches about his wife around noon, searching hacksaw best tool to dismember. Can you be charged with murder without a body? And can you identify a body with broken teeth? Shortly thereafter, he was seen on security camera footage and by a number of witnesses going into a Home Depot, where he picked up a girth of suspicious items. His purchase included $450 worth of items, including mops, brushes, tape, a tarp, Tyvek suit with boot covers, buckets, garments, baking soda, as well as a hatchet. He paid for the items in cash while wearing a mask, seemingly with the hope that the purchase wouldn't be able to be linked back to him. On January 3rd, around noon, Brian made another series of searches, including what happens to hair on a dead body, what is the rate of decomposition of a body found in a plastic bag compared to on a surface in the woods, and can baking soda make a body smell good. Following these searches, a man resembling Brian would be seen going to various dumpsters around Abington and Brockton and throwing large bags of trash within each. This systematic disposal is the same method that Stephen McDaniel used in the Lauren Giddings murder, and is done to try and ensure that the body is no longer able to be recovered. By this time, Anna's work, friends, and family had become incredibly concerned with her well-being. Anna was an incredibly hard-working individual, and missing any work was extremely unexpected of her. Not only that, but her social media had gone dark. Friends who had plans with her tried to call her repeatedly, but when their calls went unanswered for days, they knew something had to be seriously wrong. On January 4th, Anna was reported missing by her coworkers and friends. They called the police and stated they haven't been able to reach her in days, and they would like a welfare check done on her home. The police were quickly dispatched to her home in D.C., but found no signs of life. At the same time, the Cohasset police were dispatched to see if she was at her family home, but when they arrived, Brian told them a different story. The man who was able to charm himself into over $100,000 tells the police that he hasn't seen his wife in 3 days, and that she left in the early morning hours of January 1st to deal with a work emergency. His story is precise, and he appears believably worried about his wife. He recounts what happened the morning she left, stating that she woke up, kissed him and the kids goodbye, and then took a rideshare to the Logan airport. They ask him for more details in what he did the rest of the day, and he states that he spent the rest of the morning taking care of his sons before heading to Swampscott to run errands for his mother. He specifically states that he went to CVS and Whole Foods to pick up items for his ailing parent, and that he would be more than happy to provide evidence, should they need it. As for what he did January 2nd, he states that he spent the whole day at home with his sons, only leaving midday to take them all out for ice cream. According to some sources, police found his version of events to be believable. He seems like an affable guy who was stressed due to the family's living situation, but making the best out of a bad situation. He seemed genuine, and they assured him that they would try their best to find his wife. There was one thing that stuck out to investigators, though. That being Brian's car. His Volvo was parked in the driveway, and they had noticed as they walked up to speak to him that the back seats of the vehicle were down, as if he had placed large items in the back of the car. Upon closer inspection, a large plastic liner was also laid down over the vehicle's upholstery, but the carpet had lines in it, as if it had been freshly vacuumed. The same day that Anna was reported missing, Brian was seen on camera entering a Home Goods as well as a TJ Maxx, where he purchased towels, bath mats, and clothing for himself. He then continued his shopping excursion by going to Lowe's, where he bought squeegees and a trash can. But once their investigation began, his act quickly fell apart. The first thing that the investigators set out to do was figure out who the last person to see Anna was, so they immediately began looking at the ride shares and taxis in the area, and contacted the Logan airport to see if they had any record of Anna on any flights on January 1st. But there was no credible evidence that Anna ever left the home. 2 days into the investigation, the police held a press conference, and they inferred that it was possible that Anna had left town of her own volition, that she had gotten overwhelmed with the split living situation and the stress of the court case, and she just decided to turn off her phone. They pled with her to call, to simply let them know she is safe, stating, "We just need a call from her or someone who has talked to her." But they heard nothing. It wouldn't be until January 8th when movement occurs in the case, and in a way that no one expected. Again, the police had publicized their theory that Anna had left of her own accord, and that as far as they could tell, there was no direct evidence of wrongdoing. Online speculation around the case at that time was that she had left on a vacation without her husband, and that she was with another man, but no one expected that she had been harmed. But on January 8th, the police returned to the Walshe home and began a thorough search of the property. They brought canine units in, took pictures of the home and the Volvo, and flew drones over the home. Reporters caught wind of the search and recorded the police carrying out large plastic containers filled with evidence and going through the woods behind the home. Speculation around the case quickly turns on Brian, and the public begins to question everything they were told. News reports swiftly came out stating that the police found blood evidence in the home, including 2 knives, which appeared to have been used in a homicide. And by the end of the day, Brian Walshe was arrested, but not for murder, but for misleading a police investigation. On January 9th, the prosecution laid out their case for Brian's arrest. They state that Walshe had purposely misled the police by lying about his wife's last moments, and by stating that he went to run errands for his ailing mother. After checking his version of events, they found no evidence indicating that he had been to CVS or Whole Foods, or had even been in the area of her home at the time. They had also found footage of him at Home Depot, where he purchased many suspicious items while wearing a mask and gloves, and paying for said items in cash. They argued that Brian had misled fled them with the hope that it would give him enough time to dispose of his wife's body and make himself seem innocent. That same day, investigators began visiting dumpsters they believed Brian used while dumping evidence, and they were able to recover 10 trash bags full of evidence against the con man. They found towels, rags, slippers, tape, a Tyvek suit, gloves, cleaning agents, carpets, rugs, hunter boots, a COVID-19 vaccine card, and the name of Anna Walshe, a hacksaw, a hatchet, and some cutting shears, all at a dumpster that was located near Brian's mother's home. They were able to test the items found, and found that both Brian and Anna's DNA were located on the slippers, which had been purchased the day after her murder on January 2nd, fully debunking his story that his wife had left the home. Investigators also found Anna Walsh's DNA on tissues taken from the bags. 16 days after Anna took her last breath, her husband would be charged with her murder, and as of writing, he has pled not guilty. Her body has still not been found, but with the sheer girth of evidence in this case, it's unlikely that Brian will see another day outside of prison. We will be keeping a close eye on this case and covering any significant developments with time. But with all of that said, let us know what you think of the case in the comments down below. I'm incredibly interested to see your takeaways. As always, if there's a video you would like to see on the channel, or a case you would like to bring more attention to, email my brother and I at dreading.official@gmail.com. And remember to have a great day and stay safe.